until I introduce you. Welcome, welcome everyone. We're just going to give it another minute or so and we'll get started on this next session. Welcome everyone to this next session of the Mobile Coach User Conference, Performance Support Design. I'm really excited about this topic. I've been learning a lot about performance support over the last couple of years. Some sort of phrases that I think are really interesting are point of need. In just the previous session, we talked about how do I questions, like how do I do this or how do I do that? As work gets more complex and the whole world gets more complex, I think this idea of performance support becomes increasingly important. And so, just so happens, we have a wonderful session, Performance Support Design by Corey Richards. And so, welcome to the session. And I just do a little bit of housekeeping. Zoom does this funny thing where when you go into a Zoom webinar, the chat defaults to hosts and panelists. And of course, if you've got a comment, we all want to read the comment. So go into the chat and just change the to field to everyone from hosts and panelists. And then we'll get to see your questions. I will be moderating, and so I'll be keeping an eye on the chat for questions. You can also use the Q&A feature to ask a question, and I'll make sure Corey is alerted of any questions that come in. If you happen to be watching this via recording, on the page that you're watching this on the conference website, there's a comment feature. Go ahead and ask questions there too, and we'll make sure we get your questions answered. So with that, I'd like to introduce Corey Richards, our partner relationship and marketing manager at Mobile Coach. She's actually put this whole conference together. She's done a fantastic job, and also a chatbot expert. So Corey, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you. I am so excited to talk to everyone today about performance support design. I feel like I've introduced myself a lot this week, so I'm just excited to just dive in and get started. Today, these are the different topics that I'll be covering when we talk about performance support. So let's learn what a performance support chatbot is. I think this is a category of chatbots that a lot of people think they know what they want or what this entails. And I think most people, when they think performance support, they immediately go to a help desk and they relate it back to a chatbot that most of us are used. And it's probably the one that we're most familiar with, which is a chatbot on a website that just pops up. And I'm like, hey, how do I do this? And kind of that topic that Vince mentioned of how do I? But I think there's a lot more to a performance support chatbot than just that initial idea of getting that quick answer or asking a question really fast. And so I want to talk today not only about that part of a performance support chatbot, but some of these other items that I think are also very exciting and a way to take it farther than just a help desk. So with that, a performance support chatbot, the whole goal is to reduce barriers. So to take away some things that might be preventing people from getting the support and the help they need, or but in some organizations, getting the help you need requires you to ask someone, or it requires you to slow down someone else's day, or maybe even your day as you're waiting for someone to get you an answer. And so reducing that friction, making it easier. And I think these first two items are ones that people often think about, where it just answers my questions or can send me resources, which are hugely important and very helpful. But there's also more it can do. Like, it could actually teach me content. So it can go one step further than just answering my question. It could send me to extra places where I can learn more, or the chatbot itself could spend some time teaching me and giving kind of a learning module to help me get that information across. It could also notify an expert. So maybe my question, I get that tier 1 help and I kind of get that answer, and maybe I get some training, but I still need someone to help me. Or maybe that's kind of part of the design of, at some point you need a person to step in and get me to the next step. So it could notify a person. And then it could also do the opposite almost of what we've been talking about. Instead of pushing content, I instead of pulling content from the chatbot, I could also get content sent to me just whenever is timely. And we'll talk about what these push reminders could have in them as well, and these notifications, but just a concept I wanted to share. So I think all of this together is what I want to show you, and what I want you to think about when you think of a performance support chatbot, not just a help desk, but a chatbot that can do much more. I'm curious, when we're thinking about these things, is there any of these barriers, or is there a barrier that you're thinking of when you think of a performance support chatbot? I'm guessing that some of the people who joined today, or maybe if you're watching the recording, you have an idea of, oh, this would be helpful for a chatbot to do. I'd love to know, what are the barriers you'd like to reduce, or what are the places where you need that workflow learning, that point of need support? So I'd love if you put it on in a chat. I'd love to hear what you're thinking, or or maybe if some of these are really striking a chord and you're like, oh yes, I do need a chatbot to do something like that. And then I can take those and add those into the presentation and give you some examples of what you need. So please share your thoughts. And while you're thinking about that, let's try it out. Let's try one of these chatbots. If you joined mine or Sterling's sessions yesterday, we both shared a chatbot that kind of has some of these point of need or workflow experience parts in it. So this one's different. I'm going to show a different chatbot than I did yesterday, or that Sterling did yesterday. So this one is Geo. And if you haven't tried one of our chatbot demos before, I'll give a quick intro. So for Microsoft Teams, you're either going to enter the link that you see on the screen, or in the chat, I have the links to the chatbots. You just click on that link, it'll open Microsoft Teams, and then you just need to say hi. So Teams won't start the conversation until you tell it to. And then if you click on this link for the web widget, you will actually get the conversation right away. So the chatbot will just start chatting. And this is going to show us kind of that help desk functionality. So how do I get an answer really quickly? Nope, I want to put this to the side. I want to walk you through it as well. So just in case you don't have an opportunity to try it out at your desk or wherever you're at, I'm going to share it with you too. So here's Geo, and Geo is this really simple example of what a performance chatbot could be. So Geo has some knowledge bases, or some, I like to think of it as kind of like the brain of the chatbot, where it knows some very specific things. And this one, you can tell it a country. So I type the name of a country, and it'll tell me its largest cities. So let's start with English. I feel like every time I get on a computer, I'm like, and I'm sharing my screen, did I spell that wrong? I feel like I probably spelled that wrong. Let's type Paris. I tested that one earlier. I know I can. So Paris is the second one, where I tell it a capital and it'll tell me some facts about it. So it's in France, its population, its coordinates. So it's going to share a little information with me about it. So as you can see on Teams or on the web, it can be this really simple experience to ask the chatbot questions and get an answer. So that's kind of our basic functionality of how do I get help from the chatbot. United Kingdom, oh, maybe it is in there as United Kingdom, because that would make sense. My bad. Anyone else, are you trying this out? I'd love to hear what you're getting, and if you thought of a better country than I did. Canada? I think I could spell Canada. No, now I feel like I can't spell anything. I'm gonna not even try. All right, let's get back.
That was the right spelling of Canada.
I can't.
You can That was the right spelling
That
of
was the right
Canada.
spelling.
Yeah,
I get
you're doing great.
I get so nervous about spelling. It's
Well,
my
you actually live
secret
very
issue.
close to Canada now, so.
I know. I should really know. I should learn how to spell it. There we go. I wonder. Let's try United Kingdom. Well, I wonder if I did get that wrong. I am an avid reader. I read so much, but my secret shame is that I cannot spell anything. Spelling is my serious weakness. There's a reason I grew up in an age where Word and Grammarly could tell me everything. You were right, Michael. It is United Kingdom. That was my bad. All right. I think we've tried it up. Thank you everyone for humoring me with that. Let's get back to looking at more about performance support chatbots. So we are going to make that full screen again. All right. So now that we've tried out the chatbot, I want to think about, when is this the right answer? So if you've joined any of my other presentations or watched the recordings of them, I've gone through this with each of the other use cases because I like to stop and think. And for each of the use cases, this is different. It's not always the same. So if it's a training reinforcement or a performance support chatbot, if this is the right answer, might be a little different. So with a performance support chatbot specifically, I think actually all of them, I always start with clear problem and business case, because overall, that is going to really help you narrow down to know if a chatbot is the right answer for something. But when thinking about a performance support chatbot, you're going to want to think, okay, do we have a problem with people getting answers? Is there a barrier? So kind of with that first slide that I shared, what are the barriers? What is stopping someone from getting answers? And this can actually be a really good point in time to get feedback and ask people at different levels. How often are you getting answers? Or also being a little self-reflective of, are there things that you just don't look for? Are there things where you're not getting answers? And search around to see if there is a problem with this. And then another way to think about it is it difficult or time consuming to find answers? So I've talked with people where they have huge existing knowledge bases, they have resources, they have places that people can go, and no one is looking for them because it takes a really long time to get to them. Or for instance, like there's kind of a barrier to find them where they're hidden, or you have to search through like 4 different places, and every extra click is going to prevent someone from moving. Yes.
Lori, can I just make a comment about your question about barriers? In the previous session, I know I've said this a couple times because I don't know why I've never thought of positioning or calling performance support a how do I question. It's just, I think that's just an easy way to think about it. But in terms of a barrier, I think that sometimes an how do I question can be very fleeting. I know that it's true for me, where I might think, oh gosh, I want to, how do I do this? But then, the inertia of work will just take over right away. And then I might not take the time to actually research and find the answer to the question. And so I think that's a barrier. Just sometimes the point of need is just so fleeting that unless it's super easy for the user, they just might not even bother.
That is one that I also, I feel like we keep plugging the previous session. So I'll get the recording up for anyone that missed it very soon. But that is one that I don't think about often as well, because I think for some people that's more of a barrier than others. So a really important one to keep in mind when you're thinking about your learners or your people, your organization. Anyone else? I'd love to hear other ideas about barriers or what problems you're thinking about. So please let me know in the chat so we can chat about them. Okay, another thought is scaling. So sometimes, I mentioned sometimes people, they have knowledge bases, but they're hard to find. Another option might be currently or in the past, it's been really easy to just tell everyone something, or be like, hey, this is where something exists, or answer everyone's questions. But is scaling becoming difficult? Is it harder, or is it becoming harder, and it has been harder to get everyone the answers they need? And maybe you're looking forward and you're thinking, okay, it's getting more difficult, and so we need to start thinking about how to get people quick answers easily. And the last one that I always mention is chat. Can people chat? So is this something where they can access the chatbot, where they can communicate? And this is also where you might start to think, where would they be chatting? So are we using Microsoft Teams every day? In the previous session again, I think Vanessa mentioned that they use Microsoft Teams and web. So a lot of the organizations they work with, web is actually a great location because they're already on a website, and so they just go on and they actually do kind of use it as a help desk. Are they on Slack? Are they on SMS? Where can we put this chatbot so it's really frictionless? And with performance support, that is incredibly important. We want to make this the easiest thing. We want to make it one click away, and really reduce those barriers as much as possible. Yes, okay. Again, I'll put things in the chat. Michael, I see how do I is often a quick reminder of a process I've used. That's a great example. Okay, so when we're thinking about this, I've kind of mentioned how the makeup of the performance support chatbot is maybe a little different than another chatbot. So I want to go into that, and I want to talk about, what does this design look like? What does the user experience look like? So I like to think of a performance support chatbot as having two components. And these components might be that, like, one is really strong and the other one, there's a little less information there, or we're a little heavier in one category or the other, depending on the chatbot. But I still like to think about both of these elements. So one side is on-demand information, and you can maybe think of that as a pull. So what information can someone request at any time? Whereas the other side is more these scheduled pieces. So what gets sent to someone proactively? And we'll look at examples of these, but you can think of these as like the push and pull of the performance support chatbot. And when we're thinking about building the core of the on-demand library, and Sterling yesterday did a really good job of detailing how to build it in the knowledge base session. So if you've missed that or want to think about that more in detail, you can visit that session and learn more about this. So I'm going to be really brief. But the on-demand library here, it has these three components. So, and this can be a mix, this can be an either or. But basically, when you're thinking about how do we get our content together, because that can be an overwhelming piece of how in the world we build this out. How do we get everyone's questions answered? We can think about, one option is to script everything out and have in the chatbot, when you're writing out the conversation, you say, okay, someone can ask this question and then we'll give this answer. And that's kind of a one-to-one, and that can be a really long process. But that works well if you have few messages or if they're really detailed. The middle option, and this is one that I train and Sterling. So yes, the session right before this, and then yesterday's session that Sterling did, talk about this spreadsheet. So we can think of this as a spreadsheet of questions and answers. And this can be a little bit faster to build, or this might be something you already have something kind of similar. So this might be easier to get in a chatbot. And with this spreadsheet, we can also think of what is the volume of content. So if you have a huge volume of content, a spreadsheet might be easier. And the last option is API. So I have a couple of people that I know I've talked to earlier in other sessions where they think of, well, we have this content, or we have really great information in another place. Can we just connect where we already have it to there? So it's in our LMS or something like that. Can we just send it over? And that, depending on the other system, can definitely be possible. So those are our three options of how do we build out this library of FAQs. Yes, and then when we're thinking about what is in this message, so after we've thought about building it out, I want to think about, well, what is the content of this message? What are we going to include? So when we're thinking about the on-demand category, these are all the things, and these are just a couple categories. You might have a lot more, but these are some categories to get you brainstorming of what information do we want on demand? What do we want available for people to ask at all times? An easy one that I think a lot of people think of immediately is FAQs. So what are those top 10, 15 questions that everyone asks over and over again? Or maybe there's questions that every year at a specific time, everyone's asking the same question. So those FAQs are often like, we know the answer, everyone's already asking them, let's put them in the chatbot. Other easy questions when you think about, like, maybe people ask a lot of things about their benefits. They ask a lot of acronyms. Acronyms can be one that organizations might have a huge personalized list of acronyms that sometimes aren't even written down anywhere, or have different definitions depending on what department you're in. So this could be a great thing to add to the chatbot to make it more accessible to know what people are talking about. Job aids can be really helpful. So sending quick reference guides to people, getting them the information they need, maybe a PDF or an image, or sending them out to other content. And then I kind of mentioned find us me. So maybe the chatbot's just helping you get in contact with the right person. I may be like, oh, I have this one topic that I really need help with, but I have no idea who to contact or how to get in contact with them. So this can be a way of getting me to the right person and just cutting down that wait time or the number of people I have to talk to find that person. So here are just a couple of ideas. I'm going to move forward, but if you have any of these that you want to talk about in more detail, let me know in the chat and we can spend a little more time on this. Okay, but let's think about, I have 2 examples ready that I want to think about, and just kind of describe a little bit more, maybe some of the differences when we're thinking about a scripted piece versus a spreadsheet. So for example, here is the user experience of maybe something that could be scripted. So I might say, okay, I want to know about benefits. And the chatbot might come back and say, well, which type of benefit would you like info about? And then it gives me a couple of options. So it's a little bit more of a funnel that I'm going down to get the right answer. And so when we're scripting up the conversation, we might want to script out some branches and some menus that we're going to go down in order to guide to get the information. Whereas when I think of like a spreadsheet or an API, often the answer is just directly guiding me right to it. So we might build out a big library of, this is a topic someone might ask about, and here's the direct answer to it. So for example, here I'm saying PTO, and then I immediately get, here's the information about your PTO, here's a link out to it. Yeah, so that's one way to think about some examples of what can I script and maybe how would I do that. Okay, so the other half of our performance support chatbot is our push messages. So when we're thinking about this, we can think of this as building out more that the chatbot can do. So it's not just this guide where I get those on-demand help. It's also a chatbot that reminds me of things, that gets me the information I need. And I like to think about this as creating just this concierge where I get all of the information. And it's kind of like this hub of knowledge. So for example, maybe this is where I get my news. So when something big happens or an update happens, you can just send out ad hoc announcements. And if that's the channel I'm paying attention to, because I know that chatbot gets me important information, then my eyes go right to it. And I pull it up and I look at it and I see the news. Other things that a chatbot does really well is surveying. So it can be a really easy way for you to check someone's temperature. And that could be around just performance support in general. So it could be, hey, Corey, how comfortable are you with something? Or it might be more general. It can just be a great way of sending a quick survey question or two, and to keep checking in on people so you know what's happening. Another survey option that I've had people ask about is at the end of some on-demand pieces, maybe you want to know, when someone gets down this path, is this enough information? Do they need more information? So a survey can be a great way to check in on also some of your on-demand content. Another one could be accountability. So I've seen people do this where they send on-demand information and then the chatbot says, hey, do you want help with this? Do you want me to follow up and see how it goes? Or maybe I ask, like, what are some one-on-one conversation starters for me to help me with my manager? And the chatbot gives me a little guide to one-on-one conversation starters. And then it says, hey, do you want me to check in? When is your one-on-one? And I could tell the chatbot it's next Friday. And then on Friday I could say, hey, how did that go? And again, kind of bring in that survey and also some accountability to make sure I had the conversation I needed to. So these are lots of ideas, and I I'm gonna just now think through and look at what could these look like. So it helps me a lot to then think about, okay, what does the user experience look like for these? So here again are two scheduled examples. So we might want to remind them about a process. So maybe something, the first Friday of every month, I have to do something, or every December, we need to get something in. And so this can be a great way to just remind someone, hey, remember, this is happening, but also I have the information you need if you need to get help with this. And then again, that survey. So last week you asked for help with Cheddar reports. How comfortable do you feel with them? And I could say, I'm at a 3, and maybe it gives me extra help from there. So those are just two examples of what a scheduled conversation could look like, adding into your performance support. And I know, I don't know if some people, I think looking at the attendees, were in our last session, but I did just want to think about iTrain Ally and give you this case study and example, and you can watch more of it. But this example is a real life version of the performance support that we're talking about. And Ally is a lot more knowledge based. So the majority of the conversation, this is where I said, you know, your balance might be different, where there's one is heavier. It's really heavy on knowledge base. So Ally is there if you have a question about different software. So I need help with Outlook, which every time I use Outlook, I need help. There's always something I'm not so sure. So instead of Googling and having to search for an answer of how in the world do I use this feature, I can ask Ally, and I can just type right away and get the help I need. And in Ally, iTrain has built out all of these guides and videos, and I get a quick answer, but then I could get even more information. And it's all personalized to what my needs might be for Outlook or Microsoft Teams. And I can either just ask my question, or Ally also has really good menus. And I found that with performance support, sometimes a menu is really helpful. So like kind of those buttons that help me go forward and think about, what do I actually have a question about? Because sometimes I might not be educated enough in Outlook to know. And so I might ask a vague question, and then it can help me narrow down and actually find the information I need. And so it can be that kind of that push to get me where I need to go, instead of just floundering or not being able to find the right answer. And that can be a way the performance support chatbot really adds that benefit and helps me reduce my barriers. And I just wanted to point out, so Ally uses that spreadsheet version, and this is really complicated, so I'm not going to go into huge detail, but when we think about it, we can think, okay, someone's going to ask a question, and then there's a couple of different answers that Ally follows up with afterwards. So you can have a really nuanced conversation with the performance support chatbot, because it's going to give me a lot of support. So it's not just a quick one-off answer, like sometimes I think about when I think a help desk. It can be actually a lot more information, and it can guide me down a path. Okay, now, okay, I've said a lot. I know I have a tendency to monologue, so please, if you have questions, if you have thoughts, pop them in the chat, but I'll keep going. So next, I want to talk about workflow. So if you've attended my other sessions, this is probably familiar, but there are a couple of things that are different when it comes to a performance support chatbot. And so I'm going to hit on those specifically. So first, when we're thinking about our problem, this is where having some outside information can be incredibly helpful to either benchmark against or to really understand what's happening. Because when we're building the performance support chatbot, it can be a lot of work. And I think that's where people are maybe cautious or unsure about, is how are we going to get all of this massive information to people? There's just so many things they could ask. So that can be where doing some really good investigating in the beginning is very helpful. Of where are people's biggest problems, or where are our biggest barriers? What is the real problem we're trying to solve? And then we can kind of narrow down our scope. So it's not, we need a chatbot to have all the answers. It's, we need to start with a chatbot that maybe just does a couple of things. And I often suggest, when it comes to a performance support chatbot, to not start huge and to not try to build something that has everything that your learners, your people, your organization might need. instead let's start with 10 things or start with a much more manageable scope. First, just to make it easier for us to build, but also sometimes we don't know exactly what people need. And so when we start with a smaller scope, we can have our people at our organization kind of tell us by using the chatbot and helping us narrow down, oh, this is what people are asking, or this is the way people ask questions. And so they can tell us more just by using it than sometimes we might figure out as we're racking our brains or trying to build the biggest thing possible. So I would suggest start small, narrow down on very clear, simple problems and find your barriers. And then that'll help you so much as you come to scripting. When it comes to performance support, it's really important to choose the right channel. We don't want the chatbot to be a barrier. So, if you have existing knowledge bases or other ways for people to find answers and they're not going to them, we want this to be something that is already part of their workflow. So it's not just another thing they don't go to, but instead is something that's in their workflow. It is so easy. So I use Slack every day. That's where I'm talking with my colleagues. So if the chatbot is right there, that's where I would turn and ask like Sterling a question anyway. So it's very simple to instead ask a chatbot instead of Sterling. And so that can be a huge value add with your chatbot of putting it in the right place. And then when we're thinking about writing our script, we then want to think, how are people going to navigate? How are people going to get to the conversation? So it's really important to think through, okay, what is the experience? And to remember, this is a conversation. This is not a fancy UI. This is not a search engine where I just type in my question. So we want this to feel like we're having a conversation. And how does someone get to the menu? And once they're at the menu, how do they move forward to their answer? Once the chatbot has answered the question, what happens after? So kind of asking yourself, how should this flow? And I really like to just think about it as someone asked me this question, how would I answer? How would I end the conversation? Sterling, yes, I am trying to, actually, I bug you too much. I need you to keep doing other things. Anyway, so let's then think about configuring. So this is the part that I think can be intimidating, the scripting and the configuring. But if we start with a smaller scope, don't try to have a chatbot do anything. Again, that's where our scripting configuring can get a lot easier. And we can always build out. We can always add as we go. And that also makes it easier when we're going to configuring, because if we keep that in mind of we're going to eventually add to this, then we can create a chatbot that's easy to build blocks onto instead of building something that's like this tight conversation that ends and begins with what we build. So that's just something to keep in mind as we're thinking about a performance support chatbot, is this is going to grow a lot. And so we're going to build out our scheduled pieces. Often with a performance support chatbot, scheduled is smaller. It's not going to be the majority of the conversation. So we maybe just have a handful of scheduled pieces, but we have a lot of on-demand content. And that's kind of where we loop back to that scripted spreadsheet API screen. And then we're going to want to do a lot of testing. And with other chatbots, like a training reinforcement or something, sometimes it's hard to test and put it into real people's hands unless they've just gone through the training. So sometimes your first cohort that goes through a training and then use the chatbot is a big guinea pig. But one nice thing about performance support is often you're going to have a big population of people that all need help. You might also be one of these people that is eager to get the help. So it can be a lot easier to make this beta test of your chatbot accessible, show it around to people, have people give you really good feedback. And I found that if you're clear with, hey, we're just starting out, we're building this on, and if the chatbot also gives really good instructions. So maybe the chatbot, if it doesn't know an answer, is like, oh, sorry, I'm still learning. Please keep using me so I get better, so my team can keep building out the conversation. And then having a good close of, I didn't answer your question, but you know what, Corey can, or Sterling can. And so getting them to the place where they can get their help. And that way, the chatbot remains a safe place where I can get answers, even if it's not a perfect answer right away. So we're continuing to build that trust and that usefulness of the chatbot, even if we're still testing, we're still building. And then I found that with a performance support chatbot, the maintenance phase can actually be a lot longer, where we're going to keep building up the conversation. And that's, again, my suggestion of build it for a long time. It'll be a lot easier than trying to do everything at once, but instead just keep building over time. And slowly it will become something that you're just maintaining. You're maintaining less and less. But in the beginning, there's generally a lot of maintenance work that has to go into keeping it up. Okay, those are all the pieces that I wanted to share with you.
That was great, Corey. We now know everything about a performance support chatbot.
Thank you.
Any questions for Corey? Please drop them in the chat or use the Q&A feature. If you have questions about any of those components, the workflow, the data, I often find that one of the biggest challenges is actually organizing and identifying the content that's needed for performance support. And then I think the other dynamic that's a challenge is managing that content over time. The iTrain folks talked about that too, because you can put it all together, but sometimes the content changes. And so you do need to create a plan for maintaining and keeping content up to date.
Yes, yes.
Well, great. Well, I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A or the chat. So if you do have questions, please, you can reach out later on, or if you're watching the recording, please put any questions or comments in the comment section. So thanks all for joining. We'll give everyone back some time. Please be aware that in about 25 minutes, Sterling, who has not been replaced by a bot yet, will be, and when I said yet, he'll never be replaced by a bot.
No, we could never do that.
Yeah. A really important session about analytics, how to measure success of your chatbot. And so he'll be talking about the different statistics that you can get from a chatbot project. I believe he's planning on sharing really specific examples. And so oftentimes that's really a big topic in order to get budget approval and justification for a chatbot project. So make sure you come back in about 20 minutes to tune in for that one. Today is also the third day of our group project. If you haven't been involved, well, that's okay. But please come to our keynote tomorrow, our closing keynote. We will be showing off this wonderful chatbot that we've been building with a group for a local food bank called Tabitha's Way. And so that's tomorrow at noon Mountain Time. So we'll see you then. And thanks all for joining. Thank you, Corey. Well done. We'll see everyone at the next session. Bye-bye.
Bye.